Carrie, would you please do a roll call for us?
Mr. Steinberg,
Here.
Mrs. Rorich,
Here.
Mr. White,
Here.
Mr. Whittington,
Here.
Mayor Norton.
Here. Thank you, Carrie. We don't actually have on the agenda a public comment section. Would anyone like to make a motion to add some public comment time in case?
I'll make a motion to add public comment time to the meeting.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Any further discussion? All in favor of adding a public comment to the agenda? Aye. Anyone opposed? Thank you. All right, we'll now open for public comment section. If anyone would like to come up and speak, you have 3 minutes to come up and share your thoughts with us. Please state your name and where you live.
Could we speak after we hear what all the stuff is? You understand, instead of doing it now? After we hear what everybody's got to say or something, we'd rather have us say something now.
Well, typically I think it comes first, but I wouldn't be opposed if anyone would like to make a motion to move public comment to the end.
I'd make that motion.
All right, any further discussion? All in favor of moving public comment to after new business, I think would be the appropriate place for it. All in favor? You're welcome. Aye. Anyone opposed? Motion carries. We'll move public comment down between other and announcement. All right, new business, police staffing challenges and coverage options. Administrator Brumland, would you like to kick this one off? Thank you.
All right, I think I'll just, if you'll bear with me, I'll go through and read through the memo that I sent out with the agenda, just to make sure you all have the same background information. And then when I'm finished, I'll turn it over to our personnel committee. That's council members John Whittington and Beth Rorich. And then after that, we'd like to turn over to the sheriff's office. We have 3 representatives, the sheriff, chief deputy, and captain. And so we'll let them have some time to give a presentation. And then, you know, if you have any questions for staff, and we can have discussion after that. So like I said, if you'll just bear with me, I'll go through and kind of give you some background here. So as you know, a special city council meeting was called for this evening for the purpose of discussing the ongoing police department staffing challenges that we continue to experience in hopes of identifying options for the best and most complete law enforcement coverage for residents and businesses. We are a growing community. Our current population is 3,331. We've increased 53 residents since the 2020 census. So we're continuing to trend upward, and that's going to be our ongoing forecast here for the next bit to continue growing. Maintaining a consistent, dedicated police presence is obviously important because we want to deter crime while ensuring the safety and well-being of all of our residents and businesses. Just as important is proactive and consistent community policing, and that's important because it helps to forge relationships between members of our community and law enforcement. Get into a little background here. We've historically been staffed with 3 full-time officers, our police chief and 2 full-time officers, and then 1 to 2 part-time officers. And that gave us about 20 hours of coverage a day. Part-time officers were used previously to help fill gaps in coverage when full-time officers were not available or needed time off. We noticed a noticeable shift in staffing in late 2020, first with difficulty retaining part-time police officers. And as you know, part-time police officers, that's always been a revolving door, so that's not shocking. But it was the first time that we were unable to get applications for part-time officers. And so as a result, we began to see police coverage decrease on weekends, and most day shifts were replaced with daytime on-call. And unfortunately, the shift placed a strain on our full-time officers who had difficulty taking time off because they still need to be available on call. And then coverage in 21 and 22 consisted mostly of 20 hours of coverage per day, Monday through Friday, and daytime on-call coverage Saturday through Sunday. Then in July of 2022, we entered into an agreement with the Blue Earth County Sheriff's Office for emergency on-call service. The purpose of doing that was to help alleviate some of those pressures that were felt by our full-time officers that felt they couldn't take time off because they were having to be on call for those daytime hours and really weren't able to do anything. And then we'll fast forward to June of 2023. 2 of our full-time police officers submitted resignations basically back to back. And we were suddenly down to 1 full-time officer, our police chief. Despite adding funding to our budget last January for a 4th full-time officer, we still have not been able to fill that position because we can't fill our existing vacancies. Then next, running out of options, in July of 2023, the City Council approved another contract with the Blue Earth County Sheriff's Office for up to 20 hours of scheduled patrol coverage per week. While their current situation is working for now, it's not a viable long-term solution. Right now, we don't have dedicated law enforcement presence. The response has been excellent and reliable from the Sheriff's Office. But we, not having that dedicated presence, we have gaps in coverage, and that creates vulnerabilities for our community. We have made efforts to continue to try and hire new police officers. We've increased our pay. We've tried to reach out to other places to post our openings, but we're still seeing fewer candidates, and then the ones we are seeing are less qualified than what we've seen in the past. And I think, as everyone in the room knows, there's a significant demand for police officers in Minnesota right now, and a limited pool of qualified applicants. Just recently, we were able to, even when we've been able to extend an offer to a qualified candidate, we've had the same ongoing vicious cycle of expending time and resources on hiring, training, and turnover. It just seems like it's just an ongoing vicious cycle. And when I typed this memo last week, there were just shy of 200 law enforcement openings on the post board. So, there's just a lot of openings and just not enough people to fill those positions. And I think another challenge is that we're competing with law enforcement agencies that are larger and have much more resources and are more attractive than a small city like ours. Given the ongoing police officer shortage and our inability to fill vacancies, the city's personnel committee has been periodically meeting with the police chief to discuss staffing updates and coverage needs. Unfortunately, no long-term viable internal solutions have been identified in those meetings, other than to continue trying to fill vacancies and hope that the hiring landscape changes soon. The committee also met with the Blue Earth County Sheriff's Office to hear more about what it would both cost and look like to contract fully for law enforcement coverage. And next, I'll just kind of explain in summary what the committee learned. If the city were to contract fully for law enforcement coverage with Blue Earth County, we could expect to have dedicated law enforcement coverage 18 to 20 hours a day, Monday through Friday, and 12 hours a day, Saturday through Sunday. So that's different than what we have right now. We're contracting up to 20 hours a week, but we don't have that dedicated scheduled coverage. We have coverage that's been excellent, but we don't have a consistent schedule. So that would be the change here. It'd be a dedicated, there'd be a schedule. We would have staff assigned to Eagle Lake. And then all other times and resources would be covered with a response from the Sheriff's Office at no additional cost, which would give us 24/7 coverage. So if we wanted to contract less than what's proposed, there would probably be an additional fee, and I'll let the Sheriff's Office talk about that more and what this would look like and cost. Also, under this scenario, there'd be a lieutenant and 2 deputies that would be assigned to Eagle Lake. And one thing we've talked about with the Sheriff's Office that we feel would be very important for our community is having the wording "serving Eagle Lake" added to squads that would be used for patrol in Eagle Lake. The anticipated cost to contract fully for law enforcement coverage is $502,000 for 2024. And as a comparison, our 2023 budget for police department totals just under $470,000. Something that's not reflected in our police budget and that's located elsewhere in our budget because of coding purposes are costs for insurance, and that includes dental, health, property and casualty, liability, work comp. When you add up all of the police department's share of insurance, we're at about $40,000. When you factor in the insurance costs into the overall cost to operate a police department, we're looking at similar costs to what it would take to contract with Blue Earth County. And then lastly, another benefit of the potential contract would be the county employs a total of 37 full-time officers. And that means that there'd be additional deputies immediately available in the event of a major incident in Eagle Lake. And as I mentioned before, we've got representatives from the Sheriff's Office. We have Sheriff Jeff Worsel, Chief Deputy Jeremy Brennan, and Captain Paul Barta. They're at the meeting tonight, and when it's their turn to present, they'll talk a little bit more about what this would look like and cost, and give you an opportunity to ask some questions. With that, I'll turn that over to the Personnel Committee for their comments.
Sure. I think everybody knows that even over the past several months, we've been struggling to kind of staff our police department, even before the George Floyd incident, and then it's just become markedly harder to do that just because there's just too few applicants for all these openings that are happening. So, and as a small community, sitting down and working with the council, the personnel committee, chief cop and our administrator, we're looking for ways to make sure that we can provide safety to the community. And knowing that, or thinking that we're just not going to be able to staff it. So how do we do that? And thankfully, we entered into the on-call contract, which we've had some very good success with that. So we felt comfortable to reach out to the Sheriff's Department and just kind of start the discussion about what could it look like for them to staff our police force. Not to move it, not to do anything with that, but to really staff it and provide the coverage that we need to do. So I think there's several benefits. I think we're going to, we'll end up with a very professional, well-trained police force. They've already proven that time and time again. Less administration time. I think we have, there's a lot of administration time as we go into a small force. There's scheduling changes, those kind of things. And also, I did like the fact that we have 3 officers assigned to us that'll be here in the city, potentially. I also like that we have this whole force that backs us up. So if we have a vacation or we have an incident where we lose one of our officers, which we would consider that, we would have, some coverage. We wouldn't have to worry about, now we're down another officer, how we're going to fill those 40 hours. For that week, those kind of things. So I think, it was great to kind of reach out and say, what are options? And they were really good about, talking through, potentially how we could do that and just keep our, our community safe. That's one of the things that the biggest thing I think we're charged with is the safety. So, that's where I'm at on this side of the fence, I guess.
Yeah, and I mean, I would echo everything he said. I would say that this is not something that we talked about last week and said this is what we're doing. This is something that's been going on since January, February, March, even before that, clearly back in July of 2022 when we reached out to Blue Earth County for the emergency on call. So we've met tirelessly with Personnel Committee, Jennifer, Chief Cop, to be creative. How can we do, thinking outside the box on every piece that we can possibly do. Coming back to the fact is there's just not candidates. When we have 5 applicants year to date to fill 3 positions and none of them are qualified, at what point do we have to make an adjustment to make sure that the community stays safe, stays the community that we've had? People move here for quality of life, and if we don't have that law enforcement backing the safe community, at some point it's just the gaps, people are gonna come, and then it's harder to get them out once they're here or to get it back under control once it is here. So I think, especially the Personnel Committee, but I think council in general feels very strong about making sure we keep the community safe, whatever that may mean. I don't think any of us are looking at it as wanting to get rid of Eagle Lake Police Department or any of that. We're just wanting to make sure that there's law enforcement consistently here. And burnout is a big concern of mine when we only have 1 officer on duty. When are you supposed to, do anything, right? You're either on call or you're going home and still worrying about what your department is doing or lacking or missing out or what's going on in the community. So Chief Cop has had amazing support from the county, but they're servicing the whole county and then helping us too. They're not dedicated to Eagle Lake. And that's, I feel, our main piece is to keep the community safe and be there for them by having dedicated law enforcement officers. And I don't foresee that happening in the next year, at least. So how long do you keep doing this? before we have to make the change. And I think that's what we're at now, is we need to make a change to keep our community continually growing and safe.
Thank you, Mr. Brumlin, Councilmember Whittington, Councilmember Roach. I don't think any of us are sitting up here kind of like this is the first conversation we've had. We have talked about it, and I know we have kind of beaten to death every single option that we could possibly come up with. And I know you're Superman chief cop, but you can't do every single shift every single day. It's not possible, right? So what do we do? I feel like we don't even have options at this point. We have one option, and that is going forward with the county. I don't think this is sustainable as is. But I would be very happy to hear any other comments and thoughts from the rest of council. And if we don't have any other comments at the moment, we'd be happy to hear comments from our city attorney or.
As you're considering this, you have a couple different options. Obviously, you can go forward and do whatever you want, but one of the things you should consider is whether or not this is looking to make a permanent change for the city in regards to the police department. Are you looking to do something on a temporary basis? And by temporary, that may be 5 years or not. But a permanent change would require that we go through the ordinance and change the ordinance as it is currently. That establishes the police department. A temporary change, we could probably avoid doing that, but there is some language in the current statute.
Could
or the
you
ordinance.
come forward just a
Yeah,
little
it's-
more? Thank
There
you.
is some language in the current ordinance that would be problematic with the sheriff's department. And I don't know that it would be something that's going to be workable doing that. So we just would want to make sure that that language kind of conforms with it. I do think the council is absolutely right when you're taking a look at this matter and going forward, that there is a shortage of officers out there. I'm sure, the sheriff is going to be able to tell, difficulties that he may have or not. I don't see that changing probably for 5 years until the attitudes about law enforcement change somewhat. You get a popular movie or your popular TV show, you'll see spikes. We see that with attorneys, doctors, those type of things where there's spikes if there's some good, media out there. But right now we're just not in that and taking a look at. But that's probably the biggest concern that I have for the council is whether or not we're looking to do something and revisit it in a number of years, or we're looking to make a permanent change for the city.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but the contract we would be looking at considering is 1 year at this point. Is that
The
correct?
contract would always be something that would be either 1 or 2 years, and the council and the future councils would have the ability to either enter into different contracts with different entities or not. A few years ago, there was a couple of communities up in the Twin Cities that were looking at hiring private police departments that did not work well, but there's always options that would happen in the future. So the contract and the ordinance are slightly different when in our consideration, but you are right, that we'd have to have something in the ordinance that would give you some options of going back and forth, because if you can't work out something with the sheriff's department, certainly you're going to be required to do something yourselves going forward. And we saw that with the city attorney, or the county attorney being the city attorney for the city of Mankato for a number of years, and then they weren't able to work things out, and the city of Mankato had to hire somebody outside of the Mankato area to take over that role.
Anyone from Blue Earth County like to speak?
Sure, I can. Chief Deputy Jeremy Brennan with the Sheriff's Office. Kind of to go back, again, like the Personnel Committee said earlier, we had met, a couple weeks ago, and they asked for options. So we gave them a proposal for contracting police services over here, law enforcement services in Eagle Lake. They asked me to present, and there's not much to present on the contract other than I thought, well, I will present what the Sheriff's Office is and talk a little bit about how we can provide some law enforcement services for the city of Eagle Lake. So, all right. So, Blue Earth County Sheriff's Office, you can go to the next slide. So obviously, Sheriff Jeff Wursel is the elected sheriff. It is our mission to provide quality service that promote and protect the safety, security, and well-being of all the people in our community. A little bit about our agency or our organization is, as you can see at the top of the slide, administration would be Sheriff Jeff Wursel, Chief Deputy Jeremy Brennan, Captain Paul Barta, who's in attendance, and then an Emergency Management Director, Eric Weller. Our organization consists of a patrol division, that's kind of our most visible part of our agency, and that's our patrol deputies, and that consists of 4 lieutenants and 20 licensed deputies. Then we have our investigative division that has a lieutenant assigned to the drug task force and 3 general investigators, as well as an investigator assigned to the drug task force. So it consists of five investigators. Then we have our records, evidence, and office coordinator. That consists of our 2 full-time records gals up front, a full-time civil process person, part-time records, and gun permits. We also have a full-time office coordinator and an assistant emergency manager. And then we also have our communications center and our detention division, as well as our bailiff division or court security. They're all utilized by Eagle Lake PD already. Obviously, if Eagle Lake arrests somebody, they take them to our jail. Our dispatch already answers the 911 calls and dispatches for the city Eagle Lake. And our court security division is obviously up in courts, and when they come to court, they keep everybody safe and keep it moving up there. So it's just a little bit about our organization and what we have at our office. As far as contracted law enforcement services, the city of Eagle Lake came to us. They requested a proposal on contracting the services for city Eagle Lake. When we looked at it, I looked at kind of what the city's been doing for the past how many years and the hours that they were covering. And I don't know, a month or 2 ago, and when Captain Barta and I came and we listened to your council meeting, and there was a lot of talk of specific patrol hours and having a car in town, somebody patrolling and what kind of service, just the visible service of law enforcement in general, just being out there and visible. So I took basically the 3 full-time staff, which comes out to be 6,240 hours of patrol coverage. We would staff that in our discussions with 1 lieutenant, which is a supervisor in our agency. We currently have 6 lieutenants, 1 in the task force, an administrative lieutenant, and then 4 patrol lieutenants. So we would add a lieutenant position as well as two deputy positions to cover the city Eagle Lake. It would provide 20 hours of patrol coverage like Jennifer talked about, Monday through Friday, and then approximately 12 hours of coverage on Saturday and 12 hours on Sunday. Again, we're a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week organization. We have somebody on or a couple people on all the time, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And then we are currently staffed with 37 full-time licensed peace officers. So we're fortunate right now. I don't know how long that'll last, hopefully forever, at least until I retire. But yeah, we're lucky right now, and some agencies aren't. So some benefits to contract for law enforcement services, obviously you can see the advantages. There's financial advantages, there are known costs, automatic replacement for injured or sick deputies. You guys kind of talked about that. If somebody calls in sick, we have enough patrol staff, we can fill it with somebody over here, so you're not missing the hours, the visible patrol. That you're provided with a fully trained, experienced officer. We're not going to send somebody over here on their first day and say, here's the keys to the town, go to work. We're going to train them, we're going to have them up to speed. They're going to pass our FTO process before they ever show up on solo patrol over here. We're going to pay to hire and train the deputies, so that liability and cost factor is not yours. And obviously you'll have access to the additional resources as far as what our agency has. Something bad happens, something minute happens. If the person working doesn't have the answer, they have many people and resources they can call and dip into. The increased level of service, again, a major incident happens over here. You got the full force of the sheriff's office, whatever that is. If it's a natural disaster, you know, we can get people over here to help with that, whether it's from emergency management down to directing traffic, you know, at a busy intersection. You'd have access to all the sheriff's office divisions and specialized unit, and you'd have additional resources to address specific concerns. And some of that is like those quality of life issues. You get the come and go traffic at a house that you're thinking maybe there's drug activity or there's a problem neighborhood. You know, we'll dedicate whatever we have to try to solve those issues with the city and with the neighborhood. And then obviously the reduced liability just overall. You kind of saw what it costs for insurance and all that stuff, and it's expensive. So, and the more people you have, I'm not saying it's less expensive, but it gets absorbed a little bit easier than when you don't have many people or many employees. So, some of our specialized units, we have a dive team, a drone team, we have a DWI traffic enforcement officer, emergency management, water patrol, boat patrol, ATV patrol, and then 2 K9 teams, hopefully coming soon if everything shakes out. So, I reached out to several other chief deputies around the state and just kind of looked at if the cities that they contract and how many, and you can see the list there. Chisago County, for example, has been doing this for probably close to 20 years. I mean, this has just been, some cities chose years ago when it was tougher to find officers and have just done it and it works. I think that list in the next 3 years is gonna fill up about 4 slides. It's happening all over the state. It's nothing that there is one city or municipality that's doing something wrong. There's just not enough, there's more cops retiring and quitting than there are coming in. And it gets difficult. And, you know, I'm sure everybody saw Goodhue County in the news a couple weeks ago. And, you know, Sheriff Kelly had you know, we're robbing Peter to pay Paul, and I don't know how long we're going to sustain doing that. So I hope we can somehow promote our profession and get good people out to do this profession, and we can get some good applicants and sustain this profession without, you know, not keeping the cities and counties safe that need to be, the work that needs to be done. So, again, our office is always been, you know, you can call it what you want if you put a name to it, but, you know, community involvement and collaboration with cities, we've always strived ourselves on that. Just a couple things that we've done, and there's many, many more that things we've participated in, but city council meetings, you know, we currently contract some hours for several cities in the county. We have liaisons that are kind of assigned to those cities, and they do go to the city councils and participate. That wouldn't change here. Somebody would be here to answer your questions and provide any information you guys have questions for. Participate in Night to Unite or National Night Out events, community picnics and back to school events. We're involved with school patrols and school safety. We have youth firearm safety courses, youth ATV safety courses. We have community interaction on a daily basis and many others. I mean, our deputies are kind of known for stopping out where people are and just taking a couple minutes here and there just to visit with them and throw the football for them. We get calls all the time where, you know, a deputy was over Madison Lake and somebody sent us a picture where he was playing catch with a kid in football in the front yard, and he just was driving by and the kid was throwing the football in the air, and he stopped and took 10 minutes out of his day to do that, and we strive ourselves on that. So it's one thing we do. So just some pictures of some of the events that we've been involved with. And any questions?
I did have one, if you wouldn't mind going back to the slide about the different cities that do contract.
Yep.
Are any of these more recent, do you know, or has this been a lot of long term?
I guess I didn't specifically ask, but it's hard to track because there's so many. I mean, Goodhue just went to a contract. There's several counties out west in the 5th Sheriff District, out in Murray County and Lyon County, and some of them are at this stage. But there's many agencies. Jackson County isn't up there. Jackson County contracts for the city of Jackson I think there's one police department left, and it's a 1 or a 2-man show, and they're hanging on. So there's many more that are in the same boat. So
The reason really that I ask is just thinking of a transition time. What would it look like if we were to turn the lights off? Do we flip them back on and you guys are ready to, I mean, what does that look like?
I mean, obviously we got to set a date for it to start it, just, and get contracts in place, whatever the city and the county, and we can't control that. I mean, that's got to, up to you guys, and then it's got to go in front of the county board. So specifically when we could flip the light switch, I don't have that answer. It just depends on when they, if everybody agrees on the contract but from there then, I mean, it's going to take us a while to obviously hire and train people, but in the meantime, we will fill those hours. The big thing, like some of the comments and questions that I've gotten at our office is, the idea behind it is we want to give you some dedicated people so you know their faces over here, because that's important to you, and that's what we heard back at that meeting, is that you want some people, and we will strive to do that. Obviously, we got to hire people to do that, and in the meantime. But the big thing is you're contracting an amount of hours. So those 3 full-time people would be 6,240 hours. That's what we're going to provide. We're going to make sure somebody is here patrolling your streets for 6,240 hours on those shifts. So no matter who it is, if somebody calls in sick or we don't have somebody hired yet, we're going to make sure somebody's here fulfilling that contract in those hours. Our goal is to try to get some dedicated people here so you know them by first name, and they're going to be kind of the ones you're going to see drive around and be here for the most part, Now, they're not going to be immune, because I can't make that. They're not going to be immune to promotions and things like that in our organization. If we have a detective opening and they put in and they're the best person for the job to get that detective opening, I'm not going to hold them back to say, sorry, we hired you here, So there'll be a deputy sheriff for the sheriff's office assigned here until there's an opening somewhere else that they might want to move up in our organization, and we'll still fulfill those hours, if that makes sense, and try to find that dedicated person here and be the face for you guys.
This is very similar. I lived in Chisago County before moving here, so Sheriff Thean and we knew just about everybody by name after a couple of years, so it might be a bigger community, but
Right.
It's very similar.
And he brings up a good point as far as the hiring and the training and all of that piece. We as a personnel committee talk too on, it doesn't do our community any good if we're consistently training. And by the time we get one trained in, they're here for a little bit and then they move on to the next thing. And then John, Chief Cop, is back to square one again. So when we're, have 2, 3 full-time officers, he can absorb that training period and still have someone else out, another patrol out there, which is typically what we would do. We'd have 2 squads out, one training, one not. But if it's a constant revolving door of applicants or not, and once a year we got one coming in, and he's spending his time training, he's not doing justice to the community on what we need him to do, and that's keep us safe all the time. If he's doing that, at least the sheriff's department, they can train whoever throughout the whole community and the whole county versus always having to train that person in Eagle Lake.
Well, and we are, in reality, we are limited to how many people we can staff if we go with the police department. We have Chief Cop, and then we would have 2 to 3 deputies, and there really isn't much of a move up for them. Like you're talking about with the county, there's ability to apply for these jobs and move around without that being, practically a traumatic event for us if we lose a deputy, right? That's something you guys would be working through. So the business continuity aspect of that is appealing to me. Everybody wants to progress in life, that's why we learn, that's why we work, and I like the idea that those opportunities would be there.
Madam Mayor, with one of the questions that you asked the Sheriff's Department was the timing. From the city's perspective, I don't know that we could have things put in place before the beginning of the year. If we're looking at changing the ordinance, you're probably looking about February 1st, just because we have to give 30-day notice after we introduce it, and we're getting close to the end of the year. I don't think that's major. The contracts can get themselves worked out, but you're probably looking at first of the year, 1st of February as being the changeover date.
And thank you for that. And if I remember correctly, what you stated earlier, if we went temporary, we wouldn't necessarily have to do the ordinance change.
Right, if you're just looking at this as kind of a temporary fix. But one of the concerns that you're raising is the training. My experience with smaller departments, whether that's, Janesville when I used to be over there, or like Crystal in particular, if you have a small department that's doing its job well, you're going to be training new officers all the time because you will not have the financing to keep good officers, and they're going to be taken by cities. Well, I'll use another city I
Darn
represent.
county sheriffs taking them all.
Well, the county sheriffs are good at doing that. The city of North Mankato, historically, that I do represent, hires people that have experience from either smaller cities or sheriff's departments and the rest because they have the resources, and they can go ahead and do that. So if we are, that's one of the things you may want to consider if that's a strong concern. If we have a strong department here at some point, we're likely to always have high turnover.
And I can clarify, high turnover is one thing, but high turnover with 0 staff or 1 staff is a little bit tougher to absorb, right? I think when we talk term length, or is this a short term or a long term, permanently going to the sheriff's department or staying Eagle Lake, I don't think any of us, or at least myself, has that answer saying we want to permanently go to the county. I think this we're looking at is at least a year, probably closer to a 3-year to get the law enforcement field back up, right? There's a massive drop in 2020 with the events that have happened. And I think the only way we can make a positive change, not only in our city, our county, but statewide, is to collaborate and regrow that department, like the sheriff's department said. And so I guess I would look at it more as a short term in the sense that it's, a yearly or 2-year contract or something, but it might go on for 5-10 years. It might be a 3-year, 4-year, 5-year, and we have a massive boom. I don't see a massive boom happening in 2-3 years, but if the field grows and we can get Eagle Lake dedicated PD back, I think that that's what the community would want too.
Yeah, I think as we work through this, it's a crystal ball, right? Nobody's got the crystal ball. I think a lot of people think that the environment, the hiring, just the number of applicants are probably going to get a little worse for a while. So being able to have this either for short-term or long-term, having this opportunity and getting into this opportunity before everybody else does is beneficial to us. And then we can continually look at this. It's not like we can't every year, take a look at it, And I'm assuming that we'll do that, right? We'll sit down yearly and work with the sheriff's department and say what happened, what did we do well this year, what didn't, could we improve, and at certain times, make that decision. Because what we're looking at, what I see this as is a staff augmentation of the department, right? So we're bringing in well-trained professionals to staff the department for the foreseeable future until something changes one way or another. So, I think everything's on the table all the time. It's just, I think it's going to be a while.
What would the county need from us as far as resources? What kind of time? What would we need to be doing for you? Is there space? I mean, would we utilize space here?
I know Jennifer and I talked briefly about it, is the biggest thing is to have some office space. That would be it. I mean, we'll provide everything else, but obviously we want to keep the deputies in town as much as they can, and so if we provide them office space to get their reports done and take their break here and stuff, that will certainly help them, be here. And probably a few of the deputies that are patrolling the county might stop and have their evening break or whatever with them as well, and so you might end up with a couple extra deputies in town at times, so.
I'm not sure we'll have the answer here tonight. I'm not sure that Sheriff Wursel would even have the answer. But the initial contract is likely to be for more than 1 year if they're having to go to the expense of hiring officers specifically or adding them on. Because at least if I was the county administrator, I'd be concerned about hiring somebody and not necessarily being able to terminate those positions. And there's ways to get around that and take a look at that. But the county attorney's office thought they had done some of those things, and it wasn't as easy to get rid of the positions when they lost a contract for the city of Mankato as they expected it was going to be. Yeah, and that's just to let the council know, when we're looking at this, we may not have that, a question today unless the sheriff has an answer to that.
Thanks, Chris. The county board, I can tell you right now, will not approve a contract that is going to involve hiring 3 people for 1 year. They just won't entertain that. So, and I know this kind of might have sounded like a sales pitch, and I assure you it was not. We were asked by the city to show off our department, and Jeremy did a great job of showing off our office. And it's up to the city what the city want. I've had some residents already ask me, well, you guys have to take the calls anyway for contract. We do. We can either provide you with service or we can take your 911 calls. And that's not up to the sheriff's office. That's up to the city of Eagle Lake. So I just hope that, I just wanted to address that issue. So, any other questions of me while I'm up here?
How long of a contract would be ideal for the county board?
That I don't know. That's up to the county board. I haven't been to a board meeting on this yet because it hasn't been agreed on by the city. So that'll have to be negotiated.
I can't speak for the county board, but I can, if I were advising them, it would be 3 to 4 years for that first initial, contract, then maybe go on a year-by-year basis after that. But that's what I would be looking for on a budgetary type of thing for that kind of investment.
I think it's important to clarify what Sheriff Wursel said too. We're asking, or what we would be asking for would be dedicated coverage. It wouldn't just be responding to 911 calls. Just when a deputy happens to be patrolling through Eagle Lake, we would have dedicated staff here with, our office as a resource place for them to be able to do the reports and be in Eagle Lake. So I just want to clarify that.
Thank you. Any other questions for Sheriff Wursel? Thank you.
The one thing that the council would be giving up if we do make a more permanent type of change is where the city code right now says that the police department has to follow the lawful orders of the council. If you're hiring the sheriff's department, the deputies have worked for the sheriff, who is an independently elected official, so he's going to have that ultimate authority. We have not seen that be a problem in the cities that I have that do contract with the sheriff's department. I know Get Thunder does that, and they have their own mixed feelings about everything. But in Lake Crystals, it worked very well, but they have kind of a hybrid situation. But that's, the one thing, and when I refer to the code as being the issue, that's the part of the code that would need to be changed.
Thank you. So what I'm hearing then is that temporary really wouldn't work. So we have to look at doing that change.
Or is 3-year considered still temporary? I think no matter what, it's not just a flip of the switch and Chief Cop is out, he walks out of his office and the next department walks in. I mean, there's a big change for both departments. So I would not want to do it if it wasn't for the 3 years too. I mean, I don't foresee in all of the stuff that we've gone through over the last 6-7 months, anything that is stated any different, or the person, professional people we've talked to stating anything that's going to change next year. I do think we're talking 3-4 years out before we see a big enough change that the applicants are going to come to a smaller city and apply for maybe a little less wages than a bigger city, or places that aren't going to have that room for continued growth.
And for all any of us know, it could get worse.
Right.
We don't know. And
Well, and it's, if we make that change, we can always change it back as we progress down.
You can always change the
Right.
ordinances or change the code.
Right.
Temporary, I don't think we want to take a look at it as necessarily being a set period of time, 6 months, 3 years, where that case would be. I think the real question is whether or not you're disbanding the police department, because that's more of a permanent change. Granted, you can reverse that change. You know, a future council can change the code if they want to. It's just a process that we go to. But if we're no longer having our own police department, I think you've made a permanent change in an action. You know, whether that's, even if that's only in place for 6 months in that particular case. You know, if we are keeping a police department in some fashion and then working with the sheriff's department in coordination with that, then I think it's a temporary situation where we're just looking to rebuild staff over time.
Does that make sense to everybody? So what would our course of action be tonight? Do we want to make a change? Do we want to table this for the next council meeting?
I think Beth, were you going to say something? No. What I was looking for is just something to allow us to move forward and work with the sheriff's department, so we can get something together to bring back to the council, as in a contract, whether it's 3 years or whatever that is. Then we could have some kind of understanding of how the ordinance needs to change for that. That way, because we have to go through, as far as I understand the process, we need to go through, get the contract in place, us approve it, and then it moves up to the county board for the approval there. So, you know, it's kind of in our area to kind of move forward. So what I was looking for tonight is just something that says, continue to work through that and then bring a contract potentially to the next meeting here in October. Was it the 2nd? But then we wouldn't, and then I think we understand what the ordinance change needs to be once we see more of the contract language.
And I would say that this meeting also just brings the significant attention to where we are at. You know, that we do have a lack, and we either need to continue where we're going and have gap in coverage, potential burnout in our chief. They go on and on, right? Or have the full coverage by going with the sheriff's department. So, I mean, just bringing the awareness to the community, being totally transparent, and say we've looked at all these options. I mean, we want to speak and do what we need to do. We're elected officials for the community. You know, we're not going to do what I personally maybe want to do, this or that, but we wanted to hear from community members and if they were for or against it, hard way, one way or another, and have that open dialogue to what we want to do and what the community really wants the council to kind of look at hard on for the foreseeable future.
So what I'm hearing then is that we'd like to at least move forward looking at that contract and review it at the next council meeting if it's ready in time.
I think that's a big if. It's only a week before the contract. I can get language to you regarding changes to the code and the ordinance in that period of time. But I don't want to speak for the county. They have probably 3 different layers that they have to go through to figure out what that looks like. But before the council takes any action, Madam Mayor, you delayed the public comment section until after your discussion. So before you take action, you may want to hear from the public. You may not, but I was just going to remind
We definitely may. Would anyone like to move on to the public comment section? If you would, please state your name and where you live.
Ken Reichel, 101 Maywood Avenue.
Thanks for coming, Ken.
Was a former mayor over in Madison Lake for 12 years and on the council for 4 other years other than that. I guess we went through this transition thing one time and was trying to work through it. And I'm just saying right now that if you do this, you might as well plan on a $750,000 startup when you get rid of all your patrol cars, all your stuff, the equipment. I don't know how many people in here own their own business, but can you imagine starting all over? That's what you guys are gonna end up doing. And I think the sheriff's job does a great job too, but it's a lot of commitment, and I can understand where they're not gonna wanna go into it and say, hey, we're gonna try this for a year, because of course now they're gonna change all their commitments and stuff. And you've got another gentleman here that's been with the city for how many years? I mean, is it so bad if you transition Johnny and then get some, can you work together to have, well, I don't know what's going on now. Nobody's explained what's going on at this point. Are you guys contracting right now for the sheriff? I know we got 2 or 3 sheriffs that live in town, don't we?
I can answer. So right now, the city has contracted with us for 12 to 20 hours per week of dedicated patrol hours to the city. Obviously, that's at different times when our call load and when we have staff available to do that. There is a section in there about certain hours, but they have contracted with us for some hours in town, but it's kind of sporadic on when it's happening, so.
Which is kind of a nice thing anyway. We used to always over there, we'd mix it up. We never let anybody know when people were working. You know what I mean? If you give them a, you know, you're gonna call up your thieves and say, hey, we're gonna only be there 12 hours on Saturday from 8 o'clock until 8 o'clock at night. You know, they're smart enough, they're gonna figure it out. If you just leave it up in the air.
Chief Cop and the county have done a good job making sure that that's been handled.
That's what I guess I'm saying is, you quit this, you're gonna be making a permanent change because it's gonna cost the citizens a lot of money to start up the police department. Especially when you figure all the equipment and all the stuff that you guys have. It's gonna be drastic, and I'm just saying it as a taxpayer here. I really don't wanna be the one that pays for it in the end. When I think right now you can just slow it down a little bit and get a solution that's into this until you get, like your lawyer was saying here, till you figure out a spot where you're at, because right now, if you just shut the light switch off, you're not even there. You've got a lot of stuff. You've got 5-6 months worth of stuff to get figured out here before before it happens. And the sad part about this whole thing is it comes down to paying people. And I'm sorry, but I've got the budget here and stuff. First of all, this year, there's no way you're spending $469,000 on the police department. Especially when you don't have any workers here. So last year, it was $314,000 was your budget. And then you also were gonna have a 4th officer. So it's not apples for apples right now. We're talking the sheriff's department for what you have going into this. You're talking an extra officer you were gonna have, which you never had, right?
Correct.
And you, part-time, so now you're talking 3 officers versus basically 6 officers, including the part-time guys. So there's a lot of, hours that aren't getting covered and stuff. And like I said, it can be mixed up and stuff, but I think our community's good enough around here. You see the sheriff's car around and stuff, people are noticing this stuff. So they know there's coverage around here. And I mean, the bottom line is you guys are gonna have to be willing to pay people that are gonna stay here. You get good people. I don't know about where all you guys work at, but I will guarantee I'm gonna use you for an example. If you went to work tomorrow and somebody was gonna give you $20,000 more a year, you're probably gonna go. And that's what the problem is, because these small towns, we don't pay enough money to keep the good people we have. I'm gonna use Jen as an example. You saw what you had for administrators and stuff, now you've got a really good administrator, but you're paying her good money. And that's good, because she's worth it. So I guess the bottom line is, this money you wanna spend and wanna do, if you go back and do, like I said, more realistic, and don't say 469, which is a $37,189 difference between the sheriff's department and the Eagle Lake department, when it's not even close to that. Because you had extra people, extra guys, all this extra stuff, figured in there, and that's not true. So you could afford to pay somebody a lot more money and still be within that budget, and hopefully we can get Mr. Warsaw and them to help us out through this thing, whether we have to pay them extra money or what, to get us back on our feet again. I mean, it's kind of a fluke thing. I've owned my own business for 33 years now. And yes, I've had mechanics that have quit, and another one that quit 5 days later. But you know what? That's just something you go through. There are people out there, and I'll guarantee if you offer a little more money, they will come. But you can't just go by what the study is and this and that, because if you want good people, you gotta pay them.
Yeah, we looked at that. in trying to increase wages, you know.
Yeah, but you're using that chart system, I know what
No,
you're.
we're not. We're looking at trying to get closer to what's happening around the cities here. I really, it's not sustainable for us to continue to kind of increase the wages. And if you do apples and oranges, you know, we look at trying to cover those 6,000 hours. Right, we didn't this year because we couldn't get people on board.
Well, I know, but you're putting this out and it's 469,000, it's not even,
Well, that's what our budget is.
what?
That's
That
our,
was your budget.
no, that's our budget for next year.
I'd like to let Mr. Bromlin speak to this one on the budget.
Well, I was just gonna say, when you set the budget, we set for a fourth full-time officer, like I mentioned in the beginning when I gave my intro here for the background. So we have to set our budget, before January 1st, and so we had budgeted for 4 full-time
I
officers.
understand that. I'm just saying, if you look at year-to-date, as of now, there's no possible way that it's gonna be more like the 314,000.
Right, but we also have less coverage right now, and so when we're looking at like what it would cost if we would get back up to staffing, that's where we're comparing the 469.
I understand
Yeah.
that, but now, get 3 full-time guys and don't have part-time and all the other stuff, you're cutting a lot of insurance, you're cutting a lot of different stuff. Not a 4th guy, and like I said, I think the sheriff department, as you guys have seen, are willing to work with you guys, but I just don't think it has to be this drastic, one or the other.
I think our concern, and I don't want to speak for the sheriff's department, but our concern is that I'm sure they're probably feeling a strain right now with trying to cover all the cities that they provide coverage for in the county. And we're concerned, and we want to make sure that we continue to have coverage and that we address these gaps in coverage. We are growing. It's not going to slow down here in Eagle Lake.
We're
So.
only 105 houses in town, is what I got on the deal. So if you figure that out, per household, and that's counting rentals and everything, so they're still paying the tax. It's $173 a difference per household that we pay in taxes going to the other way.
And you'll see a massive change in coverage by doing that too. I mean, we're talking.
You'll see a massive change now, but not of what you had before.
We haven't had that for several years, though. We've never been fully staffed
And
for
I
the last 3 or
understand
5
that,
years.
You're still cutting down on hours, so it's not like you're going out and producing.
Cutting down on hours, how?
What?
Cutting down on hours, how?
Well, 3 guys, and you go with the county, which is totally fine, but I'm
Right.
just saying, money for money and stuff, you're looking at 124 hours with 3 full-time guys,
Right.
okay? You were looking at before when you only had 3 guys and part-time, you're over 140 some hours, and people filling in between that. So you are losing hours.
We haven't had that for a
We
long
haven't had
time.
that for a long time.
The-
Right, no, yeah, I agree with you. I think,
So that's what I'm
right.
saying, instead of getting these,
But for the 2023 budget was 4 full-time, no part-time. So
well, still, that's a big, you know.
it's a 2,000 hour difference.
Yes,
Right.
it's a big move, so.
But something to also consider is with only 1 officer right now, if he needs to take time off, we have nothing.
But that's what I'm saying, is there a deal that can be sat down and made within this bunch here? Because like you said, it's not gonna happen tomorrow, where you
Right.
pay them for a little more coverage out of that budget that you're not using anyway right now.
Right, we just have to hope they've got the staffing to be able to help us out.
I think that's
right?
where we end up right now is we have done that and Blue Earth County has been a great partner in helping us through having just down to chief cop. And where we landed having this meeting from was that really isn't sustainable long-term. And it's not just us. There's other cities that are feeling this. There are other counties that are feeling it, and they need to be able to plan and budget as well. So if we want to continue to rely on them staffing 2 to 3.
Talk to St. Clair, they don't have any coverage.
Thank you very much.
You know, I think the other piece we have to remember is not only the lack of quality applicants we have, but if we look at our last officer that we hired, Officer Guillemetti, right? And that was 2 years ago now when we hired him. I don't remember.
I think
for
it was
sure.
last summer of 2022. Yeah.
Just left just shy of a year, if I'm
Okay,
right.
so,
I don't know.
I mean,
Chief
so it's been over a year since we've had even a quality applicant that has been of hire. So how long do we continue going to this route where, especially with additional builds that we have coming in, residents come to us and say, stop building the rentals. We don't want rentals. We don't want renters coming in. They're bad people. They're not bad people, but maybe 1 out of 8 are. And all it takes is that one to come in, and then more come and more come. And when we only have one officer, chief cop, who's been diligently working to try and get officers to apply and to recruit and retain, you just can't get recruitment when they're not there. And that's probably my biggest concern, is to make sure the community is protected, and that this has been going on for over a year already.
Looks like we have another member from the public who would like to speak.
Yep, Tim Ornger, 405 Perry Street, former mayor of Eagle Lake, and I take an opposite position of this former mayor.
Thank you for being here.
This is the greatest proposal that I've seen in a long time. We've struggled with this issue for probably 10 to 12 years. It's been coming like a freight train, and here you are. You've got to deal with it. And I think this is probably the best thing that the city could do. It may be that the city of Eagle Lake never has a police department ever again. It may be that most communities never have a police department ever again. It may be that our county sheriff's departments become regional policing organizations. I don't know if that's a trend you're seeing, or we've talked about it for many, many years, that maybe this is the option that we need to go with. So very pleased when I heard that we'd have 3 dedicated patrol officers, because that's obviously what we've heard for years, is we need people on the street, patrol, patrol, patrol. Not sitting at a desk, patrolling in the car, out in the street. And this gives us that opportunity, I think, better than we've had in many years. So I'd say I support this fully. And I like the price tag, too. So I think if it fits in our budget that we currently had, and we can still get a full department, this is, as a taxpayer, pleasing to me. I don't want to have to start paying $30, $40, $50 an hour to get a new officer in here just so we can have Eagle Lake on the door of the squad cars. I don't think that's sustainable, and I think you probably all agree that it's not either. So sorry, Kenny, I'm on the opposite side.
No, but you're gonna pay that $30, $40 an hour this way, so what's the difference?
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak? All right, I do believe we had a couple of comments that were submitted prior to the meeting, people who were not able to attend. Councilmember White, I think you have one that you'd like to read.
Sure. This one's from Jim Beal, 420 Owl Lane. I wanted to come to the special meeting tonight, but was not unable to. I wanted to share my thoughts on the police situation in Eagle Lake. We have always felt safe living in Eagle Lake. I think that is one of the biggest qualities of life and the reason why people move here. I would hope most of our citizens realize the visual presence of policing agencies certainly helps with the reducing potential to commit crime. Personally, I believe right now it is extremely difficult to hire police officers for our city. For now, the best answer is to contract with Blue Earth County. We need to have a reliable policing agency in our growing community. Blue Earth County would provide professionally trained officers to our city. While the city council may prefer a city police department, the current staffing makes it extremely difficult. We need professionals when it comes to emergency situations. It appears the contract would be on an annual basis. This would give the city the opportunity to review as necessary. As time and budget allows, it is always possible to go back to the city police force. Sincerely, Jim Bill.
Thank you, Councilmember White, for reading that. Do we have any other submissions or comments? Okay. Council, any other questions, comments? We have a lot of folks here that can answer them if we're thinking of them. If you're like me, you'll probably go home tonight and go, I really should have asked that, but I know there's a lot of feelings every direction on this, and I know that there's no great answer. I think unfortunately we are all here because the climate has changed, our world has changed, and there's been a lot of things done and said that make law enforcement a more challenging career to be in these days, and we all know that, and we're just trying to do the best we can to make sure that our city is safe, make sure that people are not burned out, overworked. We don't want to have unrealistic expectations as much as we'd like everything to just be Mayberry. That's not our reality. So I know everyone has put in a lot of time, thought, effort. I appreciate everyone who came here tonight, everyone who's tuned in and submitted comments ahead of time. We hear it and we feel it. It's not that we don't want to try to find a good solution. So that's what we're doing here. If I am understanding everyone's thoughts and feelings, I think, correct me if I'm wrong here, but it sounds like we want to move forward at least looking deeper into the option and looking at a contract. What that means from there, I think we'd have to discuss at the next council meeting, but if we could make steps in that direction, if someone is agreeing with that statement, please feel free to make a motion.
Well, I'd make a motion to continue discussions with the Blue Earth County Sheriff's Office in kind of the vein of what we've been talking about, and bring that forward. Progress, I totally agree, Chris, we're not going to be done in a week. I've never seen that happen, but bring that progress to the next council meeting. And then we can start doing the timing, right? So, there's some timing that we have to hit with the county board meetings that kind of fall in between. It doesn't fall very well with our current schedule, so we may need another session. And I would favor that just to get some more public input. We've had some great input tonight, but can we get some more to see how the community is leading?
Would anyone like to second that motion?
Also,
Would anyone like to fight over it?
whatever.
I think the key for me, and I think Councilmember Whittington was saying this, is we aren't taking this decision lightly. This would have happened probably in 2022 when we first contracted with the county, or went to the county and contracted. We've had many discussions on it. So if we were fully staffed like we were in April trying to get more, these discussions might not be here. So the personnel committee, and I feel the council too, is not trying to get rid of Eagle Lake PD or any of that. We're just trying to keep full coverage in Eagle Lake, whatever that means. So I just want to make it really clear that what our mission is here is kind of like what the sheriff's department said too, and what I know Eagle Lake PD strives for is keeping the community safe, with whatever people necessary we need.
So we have a motion, we have a second. Any further discussion on the motion? All in favor of approving the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? The motion carries. I'm going to just ask you, or Mr. Kennedy, City Attorney, do we need to make a second motion regarding looking into the ordinance to request that input from you?
If you want that input from me, you would not need to do a second motion on that. I can just get that information to you so you can get some ideas of it before you're taking action. Because right now you're just looking for options, you're not looking for specific action. But I was going to make certain that the council does want me to go in that direction. So I'll get you something to take a look at.
Thank you very much.
Mayor Norton, one thing I would ask, or question, or whatever is, when the county goes to, or the sheriff's department goes to the county board, what are we comfortable with? Are we comfortable, are we wanting a 3-year contract, are we wanting a 5-year? I know it's gonna kind of lay on them and how they want it, but what do we as a council foresee that happening in the future? What are we hoping to, so that we can give some guidance to the county, saying, either to the sheriff's department, to the county, saying, hey, this is what we're looking for help. Trying to alleviate some back and forth, so maybe we don't know the answer to that, I don't know.
Well, I think we'd all love to be optimistic and say the climate's going to change and we'll be able to flip this back in 3 years, and that'd be great. And I'd love to have the flexibility to do what we want whenever we want, but I have a feeling the county might have thoughts on that, so I think
When the council's going forward in this matter, that's one of the questions you're gonna have to determine is whether or not you're disbanding the police department. Because that will entail getting rid of the equipment that we currently have, trying to sell that, and then reestablishing the department, or if we're keeping something in place. You know, whether that's keeping, chief cop on in some role or doing something, or, keeping the equipment, which if we don't have anybody here to maintain the equipment, I'm not sure that makes sense. But that is the question you're gonna have to decide, is whether or not you're disbanding the police department, and that will trigger some of the other questions. But if the county commissioners come back and they say that they need a 3-year contract, that may answer that question for you. If they come back and say, no, we're happy with a year contract, that make that decision far more difficult.
I don't think the city would want a 1-year contract, would you? I mean, if you're gonna go through this whole process, do you wanna take the risk of all of a sudden the sheriff's office saying, look, we're done, what do we do then? I just think you have to look at everybody for both sides here, and I think a three-year minimum is probably most realistic here.
I would think that we'd be looking at a 3-year minimum with either an evergreen clause, which would be just every year it needs to be reviewed and rolled over. We could do a 3 and 2, where it's 3 and then renew for 2. I think, we can take a look at many different options. We can start looking at, what the county's done in the past and things like that. But it's a significant investment for the county, so I would assume that 3 would be the minimum that we would even be able to entertain, or that they would entertain, because of the hiring, the added cost of cars and all that stuff. So that's going to be, it'll be a while.
I mean, I have to think, if we were to do this starting January 1st, and we were thinking we were going to go back to having a police department a year later, we'd be planning in February and March, and how do we get this up and running? I mean, it's just not realistic. The 2 years, I think 2 years is the minimum. But I also don't mean anything more than 3 or 4 years. I think we're also then not able to keep that flexibility. Things could change. I think we are always hoping, right? But I'm just glad that we do have a very, very good option available to us to ensure that we do have coverage. All right. Any other thoughts, comments? I have no formal announcements to make other than our next city council meeting. That's already next Monday, isn't it? Yes, it is, at the regularly scheduled 6 p.m. So I will look for a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor of adjournment?
Aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Thank you.